Before my mother cut the lemon cake, before my sister lifted her phone to record the perfect family moment, before 36 guests at the Glass Heron Room learned what kind of mother Vesta Wexley really was, she smiled at my stomach and turned my miracle into a joke. She said, "Let's hope this baby doesn't inherit your talent for making everyone panic." The room gave that soft, ugly laugh people use when they know something is cruel but don't want to be the first one to stop it. My sister Sable smiled like she had been waiting for the line all afternoon. My father looked down at his plate. My husband, Ronan, looked across the room and gave me one small nod. That was all I needed. I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded letter with an old hospital seal at the top, and said, "Before anyone blesses this baby, I need to read the letter my mother hid from me for 18 years. By the time I finished the second page, my mother's perfect white baby shower had turned into a public record of what she had done. And by the time I walked out, everyone in that room understood that the dramatic daughter had never been the problem. The problem had been the woman who taught the family to call pain drama. I was born in Bellingham, Washington, where the rain has a way of making every house look like it is keeping a secret. My mother loved secrets, but only the pretty kind. She loved surprise parties, wrapped gifts, white napkins folded like swans, and handwritten place cards in gold ink. She hated the other kind of secrets, the ones that made her look less than perfect. So when something ugly happened in our family, she did not fix it. She renamed it. Anger became stress. Neglect became misunderstanding. Cruelty became honesty. And my pain became drama. That word followed me through my childhood like a second name. Briar was dramatic. Briar was sensitive. Briar made everything bigger than it needed to be. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I was scared, I was dramatic. If I said something hurt, my mother said, "There she goes again." My older sister, Sable, never had to carry a label like that. Sable was graceful. Sable was promising. Sable was the child my mother could polish and show people. I was the child she had to explain. Welcome back to Pure Drama Stories, where quiet people carry hard truths until the day they finally place the proof on the table. If you have ever been called dramatic for telling the truth, this story is for you. Stay with me, because the letter I read at my baby shower did not just expose one bad mother. It exposed 18 years of lies, a stolen medical fund, and a family that had been trained to laugh every time I was hurting. My mother, Vesta Wexley, owned a small event space called the Glass Heron Room near the harbor. It was the kind of place where women paid too much money to sit under fake eucalyptus and pretend their families were kinder than they were. Baby showers, bridal teas, retirement brunches, charity lunches. My mother hosted all of them. She knew how to arrange roses, how to make chicken salad look expensive, and how to smile with both hands folded over her heart like she had invented tenderness. People in Bellingham thought she was warm. They called her generous. They said she had a gift for celebrating other women's milestones. I used to wonder if those people had ever watched her after the guests left, when the smile dropped and she counted napkins like a general counting losses after battle. My father, Arlen, was a retired insurance adjuster. He believed paperwork could fix everything except his own marriage. He had a quiet face, quiet hands, and a talent for disappearing behind the newspaper right when someone needed him to speak. Sable, my sister, grew up into exactly what my mother wanted. Beautiful, bright, busy, and useful for photographs. By 36, she was selling Lakeview houses, posting videos about elegant living, and using the word brand like it was a religion. I worked at the county records office in a beige building that smelled like old paper and printer heat. My job was not glamorous. I scanned property liens, birth certificates, court filings, business permits, and requests from people who had lost some important piece of their lives in a drawer. I liked the work because documents did not smirk. A date was a date. A signature was a signature. A file did not call you dramatic because you asked where the truth went. That is what my family never understood about me. They thought quiet meant weak. They thought paperwork meant boring. They thought because I was not like Sable, I had no power. But I learned early that the world keeps receipts, even when families do not. You just have to know where to look. The night everything began was not at the baby shower. It was 18 years earlier, on a Friday in October, when I was 15 and Sable was 17. She had won a regional scholarship award, and my mother had treated it like a royal wedding. There was a banquet at the Bayside Civic Hall, a navy dress from Seattle, hair appointments, new shoes, and a rented photographer because my mother said, "Moments like this deserve to be preserved." I remember that sentence because later, when my own body was breaking open with pain, I wondered why my moments did not deserve anything except irritation. That afternoon, I came home from school with a hard ache low on my right side. At first I thought it was cramps, then something worse. By 5 o'clock, I was bent over on the bathroom floor, sweating through my shirt. I called for my mother. She opened the door, saw me curled beside the sink, and sighed like I had spilled coffee on the carpet. "Not tonight, Briar," she said. "Your sister has worked too hard for you to do this." I told her something was wrong. I told her the pain was sharp. I told her I could not stand straight. She pressed the back of her hand to my forehead for less than 2 seconds and said I was probably nervous because everyone was focusing on Sable. That was how my mother worked. She did not deny my pain completely. She gave it a motive that made me guilty. When I vomited into the sink, she told my father to keep an eye on me while she helped Sable with her dress. My father came to the bathroom door, asked if I could hold on a little, and handed me a glass of water. I watched him leave with his tie still loose around his neck. At 7, they went to the banquet. I was left on the couch with a towel, a bowl, and the family cordless phone on the coffee table. My mother called once from the event and asked if I was done making myself worse. I said I needed the hospital. She said, "We are not leaving your sister's night unless you are actually dying." By 11:30, I was close enough. My father drove me to St. Bridget Medical Center after Aunt Greer stopped by to drop off leftover cake and found me on the living room floor. I do not remember the whole drive. I remember rain on the windshield, my aunt's hand cold against my cheek, and my father saying, "Vesta is going to be upset." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Hold on." Just the same question that shaped our whole house. How will Vesta feel about this? At the hospital, everything moved fast in the way things only move fast after they have already been late too long. Nurses, white lights, a doctor with tired eyes, someone saying ruptured appendix, infection, emergency surgery. When I woke up, my throat burned from the tube, and my mother was standing beside the bed in the navy dress she had worn to Sable's banquet. She looked angry, not afraid. "You scared everyone," she said. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "You could not let your sister have one night." That sentence became the official story. Briar ruined Sable's banquet. Briar made everyone leave early. Briar had a medical episode because attention had moved away from her. Never mind that Sable had already accepted the award before Aunt Greer found me. Never mind that my mother stayed for photos while I was getting worse at home. Never mind that my appendix had ruptured and infection had spread into places infection should never go. The story my mother told was cleaner, and clean stories travel faster in families than true ones. I spent 2 weeks recovering and years apologizing for it. At every holiday, someone made a light joke about Briar's dramatic appendix. Sable once told a boyfriend she almost died because she could not stand me getting applause. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because when you are young, sometimes you laugh with people who are cutting you just so they do not notice you are bleeding. The damage did not announce itself right away. It waited. That is the cruel thing about some injuries. They do not hurt loudly enough at first. They become a bill that comes years later with interest. I grew up. I left home. I got my records job. I met Ronan Hartfield at the county marina when he came in to check a lien on a repair slip for an old fishing boat. He had broad shoulders, kind eyes, and hands that always smelled faintly of oil and salt water. He fixed marine engines for a living and had the patience of someone who understood that small broken parts can stop big machines. On our third date, he asked me why I always apologized before asking normal questions. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. "You say sorry like you're entering a room you don't have permission to stand in," he said. Nobody had ever noticed that about me. Nobody had ever said it gently. We married in a courthouse on a rainy Thursday with Aunt Greer as our witness. My mother said a courthouse wedding was practical, which was her way of saying disappointing without sounding rude. Sable sent flowers and posted a picture of them before they reached my apartment. Ronan and I rented a little blue house near the water, and for the first time in my life, quiet did not feel like punishment. We made dinner together. We kept muddy shoes by the door. We talked about having children the way people talk about planting trees, with hope and no idea how hard the soil might be. The first year, nothing happened. The second year, my doctor ordered tests. The third year, I had a procedure that showed scar tissue and adhesions from the infection I had as a teenager. The specialist said it kindly, but kindness does not soften every truth. My reproductive organs had been damaged by the rupture and the infection that followed. "The delay probably made it worse," she said, then paused because doctors know when a sentence has opened a door the patient did not know was there. I did not tell my mother at first. I already knew what she would do with the information. She would make it about my attitude, my timing, my age, my stress, my marriage, my weight, my tone of voice. She had a drawer full of reasons why my pain was my fault. But she found out anyway because Sable saw me leaving a women's clinic downtown and called her before I reached the parking lot. That Sunday, my mother invited us to lunch and served salmon with a face full of fake concern. "Sable told me you're having trouble," she said. She did not say trouble with a baby. She said trouble like I had failed a driving test. I told her the doctors had found scarring from my appendix surgery. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth just for a second. Then she said, "Well, you always did hold tension in your body." Sable laughed softly. Maybe her body likes attention too. Ronan's hand moved under the table and covered mine. My father kept chewing. I stared at the flowers in the center of the table and felt 15 years old again, sweating on the bathroom floor while my mother chose photographs. Treatment took money we did not have and strength I was tired of proving. I had surgery to remove some scar tissue. I had months of monitoring. I took pills that made me dizzy and injections that left small bruises near my hip. Ronan picked up extra repair jobs. I worked overtime scanning boxes of old permit files until my eyes burned. Every bill had a number. Every appointment had a date. I made a folder because that is what I do when life becomes too large to hold in my hands. But the deeper question stayed open. How much had the delay caused, and who had known? I asked my mother once if St. Bridget had ever sent follow-up instructions after my surgery. She waved her hand and said, "That was almost 20 years ago, Briar. Stop digging around old pain." That was the moment I knew there was something to dig for. If your family has ever told you to stop bringing up the past, listen carefully. Sometimes what they call the past is just evidence they were hoping you would never request. I worked in records long enough to know that hospitals do not keep memories, but they keep files. So I requested my complete medical archive from St. Bridget Medical Center. Not the short summary, not the patient portal version. The complete archive, surgical notes, discharge forms, correspondence, guardian signatures, follow-up letters, and billing notices. It took 6 weeks. When the file arrived, it came as a secure download with 82 pages. I opened it at our kitchen table while Ronan sat across from me, repairing the hinge on a cabinet door because he knew I was calmer when his hands were doing something useful. I read the operative report first. Ruptured appendix, widespread infection, pelvic inflammation, adhesions likely. Then I found page 47. It was a letter dated 3 weeks after my surgery, written by Dr. Rhea Suttner, the pediatric surgeon who had treated me. It was addressed to my mother and father. The first line was formal. The second line made my skin go cold. Because Briar's treatment was delayed and infection had spread beyond the appendix, she will require long-term follow-up to monitor possible reproductive complications. I read it twice. The words did not move. The letter went on to say that future pelvic pain, fertility issues, or pregnancy complications should be evaluated with her surgical history in mind. It recommended a specialist follow-up within 6 months. At the bottom was my mother's signature acknowledging receipt, Vesta L. Wexley, written in her sharp, pretty handwriting. My father's initials were beside it. They had known. They had known when I was 15. They had known when I was 25 and asking why my body would not cooperate. They had known when my mother called me dramatic for going to appointments. They had known while I was paying bills for damage they had been warned about. I did not cry right away. I copied the letter. I printed it. I placed it inside a clear sleeve. Then I sat very still while 18 years of my life rearranged itself. The joke about the dramatic appendix was not just cruel. It was a cover story. My mother had received a medical warning and buried it under shame because the truth pointed back at her. Ronan finally put down the cabinet hinge and said, "Briar." Just my name. I looked at him, and that was when the tears came. Not loud tears. Not the kind my mother would have called a scene. They came quietly, like rain finally reaching a room through a crack in the roof. Ronan moved to my side and held me while I gripped the letter in one hand. I remember saying, "She let me think it was me." Ronan said, "It was never you. It should have healed something." Instead, it opened the next door. Aunt Greer was my mother's older cousin, but in our family she functioned like a witness nobody could fully silence. She had gray hair she wore in one long braid, a garden full of herbs, and a habit of saying uncomfortable things in a calm voice. I drove to her house the next morning. She made coffee so strong it could have stood up by itself and watched me place Dr. Suttner's letter on her kitchen table. She read it slowly. Her mouth tightened, but she did not look surprised enough. That hurt almost as much as the letter. "You knew there was something," I said. Greer pressed her thumb against the edge of the paper. "I knew your grandfather was angry," she said. My grandfather, Hollis, had died when I was 19. He had been my father's father, quiet like Arlen but harder. A man who fixed fences and believed bank statements more than apologies. Greer told me that after my surgery, Hollis had argued with my parents. He thought they had waited too long. He thought I should have follow-up care. Before he died, he opened a medical care account for me. For future treatment, Greer said. He told me he did not trust Vesta to handle it unless there was paperwork. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. There was an account? Greer nodded. Your parents were custodians until you turned 21. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to matter. Enough to matter. That phrase stayed with me the whole drive home. At 21, I had been working 2 jobs and paying for community college with used textbooks and a gas card. At 21, Sable had a wedding with white tents, string lights, and a seafood station my mother still talked about like it had been a national achievement. At 21, I had never heard of any medical care account. Ronan and I met with a lawyer named Calder Voss 2 days later. Calder had silver glasses, a voice like dry paper, and the calm expression of a man who had seen too many families confuse access with ownership. He requested old banking records, probate documents, and custodial account statements. It took time. Truth often does. But when the records came, they did not whisper. They shouted. The account had been opened in my name by Hollis Wexley. The purpose line said medical and educational support. My parents had withdrawn most of it the year I turned 20. One payment matched the deposit for Sable's wedding venue. Another matched the licensing and branding package for Sable's real estate launch. A larger amount went toward renovations at the Glass Heron Room, the same beautiful space where my mother now sold other women perfect beginnings. My damaged body had paid for my sister's perfect wedding flowers. My hidden follow-up care had paid for the white walls where my mother hosted baby showers. I remember looking at the spreadsheet Calder prepared and thinking how strange it was that betrayal becomes easier to see when someone puts it in columns. Date, amount, payee, signature, purpose. Lies are emotional when they enter your body. They become simple when they hit paper. While Calder worked, my medical treatment continued. Dr. Imogen Quaid, my current specialist, was careful and direct. She reviewed the old records and did not soften what they meant. The delay did not guarantee your fertility problems, she said, but it clearly increased your risk, and the follow-up recommendation should never have been ignored. She wrote a medical summary in plain language, connecting my current condition to the old surgical history. I did not ask her to blame my mother. I did not need that. I only needed the record to say what the family had spent years refusing to say. My pain was real. After another surgery, more medication, and months of cautious hope, I got pregnant. I was 33. Ronan was under an old boat engine when I told him. He slid out on the mechanic's board, oil on his cheek, and looked at the test in my hand like it was a fragile bird. Then he sat on the concrete floor and cried without covering his face. That is how I knew my child would have at least one parent who never treated love like a performance. The pregnancy was high risk, but it held. At 8 weeks, there was a heartbeat. At 12 weeks, there were fingers. At 16 weeks, Dr. Quaid said the word stable, and I carried that word in my chest for days. I did not tell my mother. I told Aunt Greer. I told Calder because some legal timelines needed to pause. I told my supervisor because morning sickness made old land records smell like wet cardboard and regret. I wore loose sweaters and kept my hands away from my stomach at family lunches. Sable noticed first, of course. Women like my sister notice anything that might change where the camera points. She saw me refuse wine at a restaurant and sent a text that night. Are you pregnant or just doing one of your health things again? I did not answer. 2 hours later, my mother called. Her voice was bright, too bright. "Briar, sweetheart, why am I hearing news from your sister?" Sweetheart was a word my mother used when other people could hear her or when she wanted something. I told her yes, I was pregnant. She was silent for one clean second, and in that second I could almost hear her choosing which version of herself to become. Then she gasped softly, "My baby is having a baby." I closed my eyes because I knew that voice. That was not love. That was an announcement being drafted. Within 2 days, she offered to host a baby shower at the Glass Heron Room. She said it would be small, intimate, tasteful. By the end of the week, she had invited charity board members, old clients, Sable's real estate friends, women from church, cousins I had not seen in years, and 2 local photographers who owed her favors. "People love a miracle," she said. "It will be good for everyone." She meant it would be good for her. She wanted to stand under her own white arches, hold my pregnant belly in both hands, and let Bellingham believe she had always been the kind of mother who deserved a grandchild. Ronan did not want me to go, not because he was afraid, but because he knew I was walking into a room built by a woman who had already used my body once. We sat at our kitchen table with Dr. Suttner's old letter, Dr. Quaid's medical summary, Calder's legal notice, and the banking records arranged in front of us. "You do not owe her a stage," Ronan said. I touched the edge of the old hospital paper. "No," I said, "but she built one with my money." That was the difference. I was not going to the shower to be celebrated. I was going because my mother had spent 18 years using public rooms to make me small. She had laughed at my pain over lunch tables, banquet tables, holiday tables, and now she wanted to smile beside my pregnancy under rented lights. If she wanted an audience, I would give her one. But this time, I would bring the program. The shower was on a Sunday in late March. Rain moved down the front windows of the Glass Heron Room in long silver lines. Inside, everything was white and pale green. White balloons, white flowers, white cake with sugared lemons, tiny cards where guests could write advice for the mother-to-be, which was funny because half the women there had watched my mother insult me for years and never once advised her to stop. Sable wore a cream suit and filmed table details for her social media story. My mother wore a soft blue dress and the face she used for donors. She kissed my cheek when I arrived and placed one hand on my stomach before I could step back. "There she is," she said loudly. "Our miracle girl." "Our." That small word almost made me laugh. Ronan stood close beside me, steady as a dock in bad weather. Aunt Greer sat near the back, her purse on her lap, eyes sharp. Calder sat 2 tables away in a dark jacket, introduced to everyone as Ronan's friend from the marina. My father stood near the coffee urn, pretending to examine the cups. For the first hour, my mother played grandmother like she had rehearsed it in a mirror. She told guests she had always believed I would become a mother when I was ready. She said some journeys take longer because some people need more time to mature. Sable tilted her head and gave sympathetic smiles. People nodded. A few women touched my arm and said things like, "Your mom must be so relieved." Relieved, as if my child had arrived to repair my mother's reputation. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I watched my mother move through the rooms she had renovated with money meant for my care. I watched Sable pose near the dessert table, her wedding ring catching the light. I watched my father check his phone and place it face down whenever I looked at him. Every detail felt recorded before it happened. That is what happens when you grow up in a house of lies. You learn to see the exit signs first. When the cake came out, my mother tapped a spoon against her glass. The room quieted. She stood beneath the hanging glass birds that gave the venue its name. "Thank you all for being here," she said. "This is a very special day for our family. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Soft laughter. She turned toward me. "Briar has always kept us on our toes." More laughter. I felt Ronan's hand touch the back of my chair. From the time she was a little girl, everything was intense with her. Every feeling, every ache, every worry. Sable's phone was up again. My mother smiled wider. So when she told us she was expecting, I said, "Well, let's hope this baby doesn't inherit your talent for making everyone panic." The laugh came like a wave that did not want to be a wave. A few people looked down. A few smiled because Sable smiled. My father closed his eyes for half a second, and inside me, something old finally stood up. Before I continue, if you have ever waited years for the chance to say the truth without screaming, read it in the comments. Because that was the moment I stopped letting my family decide what my pain was called. I stood slowly. The room shifted, chairs creaked. My mother's smile held, but her eyes changed. "Oh, honey, I was teasing," she said. That was another trick she loved. Say the cruel thing first, then make the wounded person responsible for proving they were not too sensitive. I did not answer her. I looked at Ronan. He nodded once. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. Not a dramatic folder. Not red. Not marked with revenge. Just a plain cream folder with 4 documents inside. My hands were calm. I had expected them to shake, but they did not. "Before we cut the cake," I said, "I want to read something. It is a letter from Dr. Rhea Suttner at St. Bridget Medical Center. It was written 18 years ago, 3 weeks after my emergency surgery." My mother's face tightened. My father stepped away from the coffee urn. Sable lowered her phone a few inches. I opened the first page. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Wexley," I read, "I am writing to confirm the follow-up care required after Briar's emergency appendectomy and treatment for abdominal infection." The room became very still. Even the rain seemed quieter against the windows. I continued. "Because treatment was delayed and infection had spread beyond the appendix, Briar will require long-term follow-up to monitor possible reproductive complications. Future pelvic pain, fertility difficulty, or pregnancy complications should be evaluated with this surgical history in mind." My mother whispered my name, not kindly, warningly. I looked up once. "Please let me finish," I said. Then I read the next line. "This recommendation has been explained to the patient's guardians, who have acknowledged receipt and responsibility for scheduling follow-up care." I turned the page so the room could see the copied signature at the bottom. "Vesta L. Wexley," I said. "Arlen Wexley." Nobody laughed then. Nobody even moved. Sable's phone was down now, pressed against her thigh like it had suddenly become hot. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. I read from Dr. Quaid's current summary next. Simple language, clear language. The kind my mother hated because it left no soft place for denial to hide. Briar Hartfield's present reproductive complications are consistent with pelvic adhesions and scarring following the documented infection at age 15. Earlier follow-up could have allowed monitoring, treatment options, and informed care planning. I stopped there. I did not need to read the whole thing. I did not need to turn my body into a public medical lecture. I only needed them to know one thing. The child my mother had just mocked existed after years of treatment for damage she had hidden from me. My mother found her voice, but it came out thin. "You don't understand what that night was like." Aunt Greer stood from the back before I could answer. "We understand enough, Vesta," she said. "I found her on the floor." That sentence changed the room again. It gave the letter a witness. My father said, "Greer, not here." It was the first thing he had said all afternoon, and it exposed him more than silence ever could. Not here. Not this place built from clean walls and stolen money. Not in front of women who thought Vesta Wexley was generous. Not in the room where she had planned to collect praise for a grandchild whose mother she had failed. I looked at him and said, "Then where, Dad? At the hospital when I was 15? At the clinic when I was 30? At my kitchen table when Ronan and I were paying for treatment I should have known I needed?" He looked away. That was his confession. Then I pulled out the second document. My mother saw Calder's letterhead before anyone else did. Her face changed completely. The tears had not started yet. First came fear, real fear, sharp and private. "This is also a legal notice," I said. "My attorney has requested a full accounting of the medical care account opened in my name by my grandfather, Hollis Wexley." Sable said, "What account?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I read the next lines. "Records show that funds designated for Briar Wexley's medical and educational support were withdrawn under custodial authority and applied to expenses unrelated to Briar's care, including event venue deposits, business renovations, and payments connected to Sable Wexley Carr's wedding and professional launch."
Now my mother cried, not soft grandmother tears, not sentimental tears for the guests. These were panic tears, the kind that come when a mask realizes it has no face underneath. Sable stood so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. "Mom," she said. For once, she did not sound polished. My mother turned toward her golden daughter, and for a second I saw the real arrangement of our family. Sable had been protected, but she had also been used. She had been fed a version of our life that made her bright and me small, because that version made my mother innocent. My father rubbed one hand over his mouth. Calder rose quietly from his chair. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence was enough to tell everyone this was not a family argument. This was a record. My mother tried to gather herself. "I did what I had to do for this family," she said. It was the worst possible sentence. A woman from her charity board put her hand over her mouth. Another guest whispered, "Oh my God!" Sable looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her expensive shoes. I closed the folder. My heart was beating hard, but my voice stayed level. "For 18 years, you called me dramatic because my pain made you look guilty. You let me become the family joke because the truth would have made you responsible. You used money meant for my care to build this room, and then you invited people here to watch you pretend to love the baby I almost could not have." My mother shook her head, crying harder now. "Briar, please." I had waited my whole life to hear please from that woman. It did not feel as good as I thought it would. It felt small. It felt late. I placed one hand over my stomach. My child will never be taught that pain is drama just because the truth is inconvenient. Then I looked at Sable, at my father, at the women who had laughed, at the room my body had helped pay for without my consent. "Enjoy the cake," I said. "I paid for part of the building." Ronan was beside me before I moved. He took the folder from my hand, not because I needed rescuing, but because he knew I had carried it long enough. We walked through the white tables while nobody spoke. Aunt Greer followed us. At the door, my mother called my name. I stopped, but I did not turn around. "What do you want from me?" she asked. That was the saddest part. Even then, she thought the question was about what she could give to end the discomfort. I looked at the rain on the glass door and said, "The truth," without calling it drama. Then Ronan opened the door, and I stepped out into the cold March air. I had imagined that moment for weeks. I thought I would feel victory. Instead, I felt clean. Not happy, not healed. Clean, like a wound finally washed after years under a dirty bandage. The aftermath did not come like thunder. It came like paperwork, which was better. Paperwork is slower, but it lasts. The first email arrived from a charity board member 2 days later. She said she was sorry, which people often say when they mean they are uncomfortable now that they know. The next week, my mother stepped down from the board for personal reasons. 2 baby shower bookings canceled at the Glass Heron Room. Sable deleted 3 videos from the event, but it did not matter. Other guests had recorded enough. Bellingham is not a big city when a perfect woman falls in public. My father produced bank records after Calder sent the second notice. There were meetings. There were denials. There were sentences like misallocated, family necessity, and no malicious intent. Calder circled those words in one letter and wrote beside them, unauthorized use. I liked him for that. Sometimes the right word is a door closing. Sable called me 3 weeks after the shower. I almost did not answer, but Ronan said, "You can hang up anytime." So I picked up. For a while, all I heard was her breathing. Then she said, "I didn't know about the account." I believed her. That did not erase the years she had laughed, but truth is easier to hold when you do not mix it with extra lies. "I know," I said. She cried then, and I let her. She apologized for the jokes. Not perfectly, not with the full weight I wanted, but she said the word sorry, which made her braver than my mother had ever been. I told her I needed time. She said she understood. For the first time in our lives, I think she did. My mother sent a letter, handwritten of course, on cream stationery from the Glass Heron Room. The first page was mostly about how young she had been, how scared, how hard it was to balance 2 daughters, a husband, money, appearances, and family expectations. I read it once and placed it on the table. Ronan looked at me. "Is there an apology in there?" he asked. "There is a weather report," I said. "A lot of conditions. No responsibility." But at the end there was one sentence that mattered because it was the first one she had ever written without decoration. "I delayed your care, and I hid the letter because I was ashamed." I cut that sentence out in my mind and left the rest where it belonged. I wrote back only 3 lines. "You can meet my child when you can tell the truth out loud without making yourself the victim. You will repay the money. You will never call my pain drama again." The settlement happened before my daughter was born. My parents repaid part of the account immediately and agreed to a structured payment for the rest. I did not use the money for revenge spending. I opened 2 accounts, one for my daughter's education and one for medical needs because I know what happens when care is treated like an inconvenience. The Glass Heron Room stayed open, but it was never the same. Maybe that sounds small to some people. But in my mother's world, reputation was currency, and hers had finally been audited. My father started calling once a week. Most weeks, I did not answer. Aunt Greer came over with soup and baby blankets and never once told me to forgive faster. That is how you know someone loves you. They do not rush your healing just because your pain makes the room heavy. My daughter was born on a foggy morning in August. We named her Marin after the sea because Ronan said she had already survived rough water before she ever saw the shore. She came out angry, loud, and perfect. When the nurse placed her on my chest, I did not think about my mother first. That surprised me. I thought about my 15-year-old self on the bathroom floor, trying to explain pain to a woman who had already decided not to hear it. I thought about the years I spent apologizing for a body that was asking for help. I thought about that old letter, folded in a folder, waiting almost 2 decades to become a voice. Then Marin opened her eyes, unfocused and dark, and made a tiny sound against my skin. I whispered, "I believe you already." Ronan cried again, because that is what strong men do when love is bigger than pride. My mother met Marin 6 months later in our home, not hers. That was my rule. No performance rooms, no white flowers, no audience. She arrived with no camera, no gift basket, and no blue dress. She stood in our living room looking smaller than I remembered. Before I let her hold my daughter, she had to say it. Not to the air, not in a letter, to me. "I delayed your care," she said, her voice shaking. "I hid the warning. I used money that was meant for you. I let people call you dramatic because I was too ashamed to tell the truth." She cried, but this time I did not manage her tears. I did not comfort her. I let the words sit between us. Then I said, "You can hold her for 10 minutes. Some people think boundaries are cruel because they are used to love with no locks on the doors. I had learned that a home without locks is not love. It is exposure. Marin is 2 now. She likes rain, blueberries, and taking apart Ronan's tool bins when she thinks nobody's looking. In her room, on a high shelf, there is a cream folder labeled Truth, Not Shame. Inside is Dr. Suttner's letter, Dr. Quaid's summary, and the final settlement page. Not because I want her to grow up inside my pain, but because I will never hide the truth that protected her. My mother spent years teaching me that pain was embarrassing and silence was polite. I am teaching my daughter something else. Pain is information. Truth is not disrespect. And when someone tells you that your body, your fear, or your voice is too much, you do not have to shrink until they are comfortable. That is my story. My mom mocked my pregnancy in a room full of people, and I read the letter she never wanted anyone to hear. She thought I would stay the dramatic daughter forever. She forgot that records survive, signatures matter, and even quiet women eventually learn how to speak in complete sentences. If this story reminded you of someone who was blamed for pain they never caused, share it with them. And if you have ever been called dramatic for telling the truth, remember this. Maybe you were never dramatic. Maybe you were just the first person brave enough to say what everyone else wanted hidden. The end. Commentary, discussion, lessons, and explanation. Now let's slow down and talk about what really happened in this story, because this was not only a story about pregnancy, family drama, or one public baby shower. At the deeper level, this was a story about a woman who spent most of her life being told that her pain was not real. Briar was not just mocked one time. She was trained from childhood to doubt herself. Every time she cried, her mother called it drama. Every time she was afraid, her mother called it attention-seeking. Every time her body tried to tell the truth, her family turned that truth into a joke. And that is why the baby shower scene is so powerful. Her mother did not just make one cruel comment. That comment carried 18 years of old pain behind it.
When Vesta said, "Let's hope this baby doesn't inherit your talent for making everyone panic," she was repeating the same family lie that had followed Briar since she was 15 years old. This is why Briar's revenge feels different. She does not scream. She does not throw food. She does not beg people to believe her. She simply opens a folder and reads the truth. That is a very powerful kind of confrontation. Sometimes people expect revenge to look loud, but in this story, revenge looks like paperwork. It looks like an old hospital letter. It looks like a signature at the bottom of a page. It looks like a lawyer's notice that quietly says, "You cannot hide behind family anymore." Briar's power comes from the same thing her family thought was boring about her. She works with records. She understands dates, files, signatures, and proof. Her mother built a whole family story on emotion and control, but Briar rebuilt the truth with documents. That is a strong lesson for the audience. Sometimes the thing people laugh at in you becomes the exact thing that saves you. Let's talk about Vesta, the mother, because she is the center of the damage in this story. Vesta is not careless in a simple way. She is not just a mother who made one mistake. She is a woman who cares deeply about image, reputation, and how things look to other people. She owns the Glass Heron Room, a place where families come to celebrate babies, brides, and beautiful moments. On the outside, that looks sweet. But the irony is very clear. Vesta makes money creating perfect family memories for strangers, while inside her own family she destroyed her daughter's trust. She knows how to decorate a room, but she does not know how to protect a child. She knows how to smile for guests, but she does not know how to say, "I was wrong." This contrast makes her character feel real and dangerous. She is not the kind of villain who looks evil from the outside. She is the kind of person society praises because she performs kindness in public. And that is very important. Some people are not cruel in a way that strangers can easily see. They are cruel in private. They save their soft voice for guests and their sharp voice for family. They know how to look generous when the room is full, but behind closed doors they can make one child feel like a burden. Vesta uses public respect as protection. That is why she wants to host Briar's baby shower. She is not really doing it because she wants to honor Briar. She wants to use Briar's pregnancy to repair her own image. She wants people to see her as the loving mother and excited grandmother. But what she does not understand is that the same public room she controls becomes the place where she loses control. The setting itself becomes part of the revenge. Now let's look at Briar as the main character. Briar is quiet, but she is not weak. This is one of the biggest ideas in the story. Her family mistakes her silence for emptiness. They think because she does not fight back immediately, she has accepted their version of her. But in reality, Briar is watching. She is collecting details. She is learning the difference between a family story and a real record. The whole story shows us that quiet people often notice more than loud people think. Briar does not win because she suddenly becomes a different person. She wins because she finally uses who she already is. She uses patience. She uses memory. She uses her skill with records. She uses self-control. She uses the truth. There is also a very painful medical angle in the story. When Briar was 15, she was in real danger. Her pain was not emotional drama. It was a serious emergency. But because her sister Sable had a big scholarship banquet that night, Vesta delayed care. That delay changed Briar's future. It caused damage that later affected her ability to become pregnant. This is where the story becomes much deeper than a simple mother-daughter fight. The mother did not only hurt Briar's feelings. Her decision affected Briar's body, her marriage, her finances, and her future motherhood. That is why the old doctor's letter is so important. The letter proves that the family did not just misunderstand. They were warned. They signed. They knew. And then they buried the truth. This is where the story's emotional weight becomes very strong. For years, Briar thought something was wrong with her. She thought maybe her body was failing. She thought maybe her family was right when they called her dramatic. But the truth was completely different. The problem was not that Briar made her pain too big. The problem was that her mother made her pain too small. That is a powerful line of meaning in this story. So many people can relate to this, not only in medical situations, but in emotional life too. Sometimes a person tells the truth about what hurt them, and the family says, "You are too sensitive." But many times, the real issue is not sensitivity. The real issue is that the truth makes someone else uncomfortable. Sable's role is also interesting. She is the golden daughter, but she is not only a villain. She is part of the system. She benefits from the lies. She laughs at Briar. She repeats the family's cruel jokes. She enjoys being the child who shines, while Briar is treated like a problem. But later, when the truth comes out, Sable also learns that she was used. The money that should have helped Briar was spent on Sable's wedding and career launch. That means Sable's perfect life was partly built on Briar's hidden loss. This makes the story more complex. Sable is guilty for laughing and taking part in the cruelty, but she also did not know the full truth about the account. That is why her phone call after the shower matters. She says sorry. It is not perfect, but it is more honest than Vesta's first reaction. Arlen, the father, represents a different kind of harm. He is not loud like Vesta. He does not make the main jokes. He does not control the room. But his silence helps the damage continue. He signed the documents. He knew about the letter. He knew about the account. He knew Briar had been harmed, and he still stayed quiet. This is a major lesson in the story. Silence is not always neutral. Sometimes silence is cooperation. Sometimes the quiet person in the corner is not innocent. They may not be the one holding the knife, but they are the one turning away while someone else bleeds. Arlen's line, "Not here," says everything. He is not worried about truth. He is worried about the location. He does not say, "This is false." He says, "Not here." That means he knows. He just does not want the truth exposed in public. Ronan's role is the opposite. He is quiet too, but his silence is not cowardice. His silence is support. He does not take over Briar's voice. He does not stand up and give a speech for her. He stays close, watches her, and gives her the nod when she needs it. That is healthy support. Many stories show men protecting women by speaking over them, but here, Ronan protects Briar by helping her stand in her own truth. He gives her space. He respects her decision. He carries the folder only after she has read it, because she has carried the pain long enough. That small action says a lot. Real love does not always need big speeches. Sometimes real love is steady presence. Aunt Greer is another important character because she acts like a witness. In families full of lies, one honest witness can change everything. Greer does not take over the story, but she confirms the truth at the right moment. When she says, "I found her on the floor," she destroys the family joke about Briar being dramatic. That one sentence gives life to the letter. It tells everyone that this was not just a document. This was a real girl, in real pain, left too long because her mother cared more about a public event. Greer also does not rush Briar's healing later. That is important. She does not say, "Forgive your mother, she is still your mom." She simply supports the truth. That is what mature love looks like. Now let's discuss the baby shower scene, because that is the turning point of the whole story. The baby shower is supposed to be a celebration, but Vesta turns it into another performance. Everything is white, clean, polished, and beautiful. But under that beauty is the dirty truth. The room itself was partly paid for with money that was meant for Briar's medical care. That detail makes the confrontation even stronger. Briar is not just exposing a cruel comment. She is exposing the foundation of the room. She is standing inside the benefit of her own loss. When she says, "Enjoy the cake, I paid for part of the building," that line hits hard because it is not just sarcasm. It is the truth in one sentence. The doctor's letter is the emotional weapon, but the legal notice is the revenge weapon. This is what takes the story into stronger revenge mode. If Briar had only read the medical letter, the family might cry and then try to move on. They might call it a misunderstanding. They might say the past is complicated. But when the medical fund is revealed, there are consequences. Money leaves a trail. Documents create pressure. The charity board reacts. Events get canceled. The father has to produce records. The mother's reputation changes. This makes the revenge feel complete, not only emotional. Briar does not destroy them with lies. She lets their own signatures destroy the false image they built. One of the biggest lessons from this story is that truth does not become disrespect just because it is spoken in public. Many toxic families hide behind the idea of privacy. They say, "Do not embarrass the family." But often what they mean is, "Do not expose what we did." Briar's mother had no problem humiliating Briar in public for years. She had no problem making jokes in front of guests. But the moment Briar reads the truth in public, suddenly everyone wants privacy. This is a common double standard. Some people are comfortable making you suffer publicly, but when you defend yourself publicly, they call you cruel. The story challenges that. It asks, why is public humiliation acceptable, but public truth is not? Another lesson is that being called dramatic does not mean you are wrong. Sometimes dramatic is just the word people use when your truth threatens their comfort. Briar's pain was real. Her fear was real. Her medical damage was real. But because accepting that truth would make Vesta responsible, the family chose an easier label. This happens in many families and relationships. A child says, "You hurt me," and the parent says, "You are too sensitive." A partner says, "This is unfair," and the other person says, "You are overreacting." A person asks for help, and someone says, "You always want attention." These labels are powerful because they make the wounded person doubt themselves. Briar's journey is about taking that label off and replacing it with evidence. There is also a lesson about records and accountability. Feelings matter, but when you are dealing with people who deny everything, proof matters too. Briar's emotions were valid from the beginning, but her family would never accept them. So she used records. She requested the full archive. She checked signatures. She spoke to a lawyer. She followed the money. This does not mean every person needs legal documents to prove their pain, but it does teach us that when someone has spent years rewriting your story, you may need to protect yourself with facts. Write things down. Keep records. Save messages. Know your rights. Not because you are bitter, but because some people only respect truth when it becomes difficult to deny. The story also teaches us that forgiveness is not the same as access. Briar does not completely close the door forever, but she does not throw it open either. Her mother can meet the baby only after she says the truth out loud. That is a strong boundary. Briar does not say, "You hurt me, but it is okay because you are my mother." She says, "You can come closer only if you stop lying." That is an important life lesson. Family does not get unlimited access just because of blood. Grandparent is not a magic title. Parent is not a permanent excuse. Love needs truth. Relationship needs responsibility. Without those things, closeness becomes unsafe. The ending is not fake. Vesta does not suddenly become perfect. Sable does not become Briar's best friend overnight. Arlen does not magically become brave. That makes the ending feel more honest. Real life often changes slowly. Some people apologize late. Some people only admit the smallest part of the truth. Some relationships improve, but they never become what they should have been. Briar understands this. She does not wait for a perfect apology to start healing. She builds a different future with Ronan and Maren. That is the real victory, not just exposing her mother, not just getting money back. The real victory is raising her daughter in a home where pain will be believed. Maren, the baby, represents the new cycle. Briar whispers, "I believe you already." That line is simple, but it carries the whole story. Briar never wants her daughter to beg to be believed. She never wants her daughter to think she must prove her pain to deserve care. She never wants her daughter to inherit the family habit of shrinking. That is what breaking a cycle really means. It does not mean pretending the past never happened. It means looking directly at the past and deciding it does not get to control the next generation. So, what can we learn from Briar's story? First, never ignore your own pain just because someone else is uncomfortable with it. Your body, your mind, and your heart often speak before other people are ready to listen. Second, do not let someone rename your truth. If you are hurt, that is not drama. If you ask questions, that is not disrespect. If you remember what happened, that is not living in the past. Third, quiet strength is still strength. Briar did not need to become cruel to become powerful. She stayed calm, prepared, and clear. Fourth, accountability matters. A private apology is not enough when the harm was public, repeated, and connected to real consequences. Fifth, boundaries protect the future. Briar's boundary with Vesta was not revenge. It was protection for Marin. This story also reminds us that some family systems are built on roles. One child becomes the star. One child becomes the problem. One parent becomes the judge. Another parent becomes the silent witness. And everyone is expected to keep playing their part forever. Briar's most powerful act was refusing her role. She stopped being the dramatic daughter. She became the record keeper, the truth teller, the mother, and the woman who could finally walk out of the room without asking permission. That is why this story hits emotionally, because many people know what it feels like to be assigned a role in a family and then punished for trying to become someone else. In the end, this was not only about a doctor's letter. The letter was a key, but the real door was Briar's decision to believe herself. Before the world believed her, before the guests went silent, before her mother cried, Briar had to stop accepting the family's version of her. That is where healing starts. Not when everyone apologizes. Not when the villain breaks down. Healing starts when you say, I know what happened to me, and I will not call it by the wrong name anymore. So, if you are listening to this story and thinking about your own life, ask yourself one thing. What truth have you been calling drama because someone else taught you to? Maybe it is time to rename it. Maybe it is pain. Maybe it is betrayal. Maybe it is neglect. Maybe it is a boundary waiting to be built. Briar's story tells us that the truth may take years to find, but once it has your voice, it can change the whole room. This story is inspired by real-life situations and personal experiences that people often share on Reddit and other public online platforms. We do not copy anyone's story directly. We only take general life problems, family conflicts, emotional situations, and real human experiences as inspiration/base ideas. This story is our own original creative writing. Names, locations, timelines, characters, companies, organizations, and personal details are changed or fictionalized for privacy, safety, and storytelling purposes. This video is created for entertainment, storytelling, commentary, discussion, and educational reflection. The story may include dramatic scenes, emotional conflict, and fictionalized events to make the message clear and engaging. This video uses AI-generated voiceover and AI-generated photos/visuals/images. The script writing, topic research, story creation, commentary, discussion, explanation, editing, video creation, final review, uploading, and channel management are done manually by our team. Any similarity to real people, families, events, places, companies, or organizations is purely coincidental. All rights reserved. This script, story, commentary, and video content are original creative work of Pure Drama Stories. Do not copy, re-upload, reuse, or republish this content without permission. Unauthorized use may result in copyright action or claim.